Good time of day, everybody. I'm so happy that we have an opportunity to do something a little different. And today's group conversation is going to feature a guest speaker. This is our first of a few CIO guest speakers that are going to come in and talk a little bit about the business of IT. There'll be different themes as we go along here. Stephen Franchetti is the CIO and VP of Business Technology at Slack. He's been around a long time. He's got battle scars to prove it, 15 years in information technology. And prior to Slack, he was the Vice President of Enterprise Applications at Workday, which was not an easy job because that's a big platform that he was responsible for. And then before that, he has a long tenure at Cisco, so a lot of enterprise experience. And he earned his BS with honors. I did not know this part, in computer science in the University of Edinburgh. And then also, I think there's a couple other things that we should note that are not as well known. One of the things that I thought was interesting is last year in 2019, Stephen Franchetti was voted number 8 up-and-comers in the technology space by Okta. And it's beautiful. And this is not an IT thing. This is all technology up-and-comers voted by Okta, which is really good. And then the
almost made it into the top 5, but not quite.
Almost in the top 5. Yeah, a little more PR could have done it. And then the other thing, as I had no idea, but after doing a little bit of research, he is a former Scottish national basketball player and was a 2-guard or small forward. His prowess on the hardwood was unprecedented. I mean, known in Scotland for his basketball skills.
Where do you get your information from? This is incredible, Brian.
My network reaches far, deep and far.
Well, I have to say, it's a bit like bobsledding in Jamaica, though, playing basketball in Scotland. You know, there's not too many people that actually play, but it was a lot of fun. I have to say, I had a lot of fun with it.
Favorite shot? High hook or jump shot?
Oh, well, no, I was a 3-point shooter in my day. It's been a while, though.
I love it. So, Stephen, thank you so much. I know it was a kind of a long intro for the group, but it does kind of give everyone a sense of, you know, where you've been and where you are now and kind of where you're going. And the other thing I'll just say from an intro point of view is that I have leaned on Stephen several times. He's part of my core network of individuals that I will bounce ideas off of and just sort of understand how other people are thinking about, you know, running the business of IT. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to ask 3 questions that'll kind of get everyone going. Everyone should have access to the questions and answers portion as well. So we'll try to do that in 20 minutes. I also think that, Nicole, did you want to share a video, real quick video that you guys have used in the past? Hopefully this will go across Zoom well. Do you want to share your desktop and do that?
Yeah, I can share the video now, or do you want to jump into some context first, Stephen?
Well, feel free to share the video. I mean, the context is, and again, this is, you know, we'll get into the discussion as I understand it. And Brian, I think has pinged me with a couple of questions up front. But we've been through a pretty, I would say, major change within IT at Slack within the last 2 years. So I've been at Slack for about 2.5 years now. Time flies when you're having fun. And it's been a great ride so far. But in the context of that, after about 6 months of being in the organization, we transformed, as they say, or repositioned ourselves to take on a new name and a new positioning within the organization. So we moved from IT to business technology. And really the video sort of sums up part of the reason why we decided to do that. And I think you all are thinking about a similar sort of transformation. So that was kind of the context of the video.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Why don't you share your screen? And I know it's a real quick video, but I think it'll be good.
Can you see my screen, everyone?
I can see it.
Have you ever wondered why IT is called IT? Looking back, the IT department traces its roots to post-World War II, when it was known as the Electronic Data Processing Department, or EDP, where people programmed mainframe computers. By 1965, when mini-computers gave us data processing, the EDP department became the DP department, which managed corporate data. By 1980, the introduction of personal computers, local area networks, and client-server technologies made it less about data and processing and more about information. Enter the Information Systems, or IS department. With the arrival of the web in the dot-com era, the emphasis changed to technology. IS departments adapted and became known as the Information Technology Department, or IT. But with the rapid rise of cloud computing, along with technologies like data analytics, social media, and the mobile internet, the I and the T in IT are moving further apart. With constant change becoming the norm, astute IT departments are constantly looking out for what's on the technology horizon and hold a unique point of view on the business. They need to be thinking not just about IT strategy, but about business strategy, architecture, and interoperability. IT can no longer sit back and wait for the business to come to them with technology requests. They need to proactively partner for business impact. They need to bring a focus to analytics and insights, ensuring employees have data where they need it to do their work, enabling key teams to identify new business opportunities and drive improved customer experiences. And of course, always with a mission of ensuring employees have a simple and satisfying experience so they can get work done with technology. Here in Slack IT, we believe in just that. In fact, we've been thinking about how to bring all we believe under one umbrella. And so we introduce Business Technology, our new name, and our committed way of enabling Slack's business. Business Technology simplifies how you use technology, giving you impactful, insightful solutions that will enable you to do the best work of your life. Business Technology at Slack, powering simplicity, impact, and insights.
Love that.
And that's that.
Every time I see that, every time I see that, go ahead.
I didn't know about the EDP part before. That's new to me.
Every time I see that video, I see the Commodore 64. I don't know if you saw that in there. It makes me feel old because that was my first computer.
That's good. I like it.
But so just the context of that, and we'll get into the discussion, is it was a mechanism for us to kind of roll out our new identity as we positioned it to the rest of Slack. And part of it was kind of, and again we'll get into this in the discussion, was kind of stepping away from the sort of traditional shackles of what people thought about IT, which was like fixing computers and fixing the network and all that other stuff, which is really important, and we do that too. But clearly there's a lot more that we can do for the organization in terms of driving value and all of that. So that was our kind of great unveiling to the rest of Slack about this new name and new positioning that we had.
I love that. So you kind of hit on question number one a little bit already.
Yeah.
That I had. What was the impetus for rebranding the group? And I guess more importantly is, did you start with the video, or how did you set out to make this change? And for you, like you came to Slack and you're like, we've got to do something different here. Or what started you down this road?
Yeah, well, gosh, when I got to Slack just over 2.5 years ago now, I part of me coming in was about consolidating the team, and I would say the team, there was maybe about 6 or 7 people who were in IT related jobs at the time. And they were kind of sprinkled across the organization. So we pulled them all together and unified them into one IT team. And again, at the time, it was more, these poor folks trying to keep the lights on with the sort of massive growth that Slack was going through. And it was less about, the sort of real impact that we could make, more sort of strategic impact we could make to the organization. And honestly, my first quarter, I spent the time just really trying to figure out, how do we keep the Wi-Fi network up? I remember coming in and like literally on a weekly basis, I'd get pinged by Stuart Butterfield, our CEO, with like complaints about, the Wi-Fi is coming down again. And we actually discovered that the building we were in was above a dental school. and the X-rays, the radiation was coming through into our floor and interfering with the Wi-Fi network. Go figure, right? I mean, I never knew that that was a thing. You learn a lot in this role, but I actually didn't think I would last in the role for the first quarter. I thought I'll be here for a quarter and then I'll be gone, you know. But sort of having made it through the kind of fundamentals and addressing the fundamentals, we wanted to kind of really step back, and as I said before, sort of step away from that sort of traditional notion of what people thought of IT as being kind of the back office guys, and really being, you know, focused on break fix. And we actually asked ourselves kind of 3 key questions in the process of thinking about doing something different and rebranding. It wasn't just a name change. It was, you know, how do we actually want to show up differently? So what's the future positioning of IT at Slack? You know, how do we want to, you know, really show up to the organization, you know, externally, to our employees at Slack, and what are the actual behaviors that we want to be different in the context of doing that, right? So there's no point. I'm a big believer in this, and I know Nicole came in around about that time. In actual fact, Nicole, who's on the call from my team, and she manages what we call change enablement within the business technology organization. So everything around, you know, how do we make these implementations, rollouts of new technology actually land into our user community so that they're successful? But thankfully, she's also an expert on kind of organizational change and sort of rebranding and things like that. So she's actually responsible, for example, for the video. I would never have come up with something like that. She's much more creative than I am. But it was really about, you know, how do we make this intentional statement and take the opportunity to, you know, educate the organization around how we do IT differently, how we're much more progressive in nature, how we really want to focus on impact and value to the organization as our contribution, and hence the reason we came up with, you know, business technology. And it's tough nowadays to actually distinguish, I would say, business strategy from technology strategy. We talk about being strategic, you know, IT partners. You know, to me, business strategy and technology strategy are essentially one and the same, right? I was talking to one of our big customers at Slack, Walmart, a couple of weeks ago, and they view themselves as a digital company, right? Their strategy nowadays is essentially their technology strategy. So the business and technology have really kind of come together, and it's kind of interesting to see a sort of traditional business like that really lean into this whole sort of digital transformation and overall technology strategy. And so again, you know, as a company like Slack, being kind of digital native, born in the cloud, we really wanted to kind of embrace this aspect of the technology strategy in large part is going to drive the business. And that's the contribution that IT or business technology could make to the organization. So that was a lot of stuff there, Brian, but hopefully that gives you a sense.
I love it. It's something that I think it's for the survivability of the field of IT, we will need to change, much like the video shows, where, you know, we're not going to be able to be the old IS, of course, or MIS. And I do think there's this inflection point that's occurred now that especially technology has become so commoditized. For the most part, there's no real competitive advantage for an IT organization from a tech stack perspective, or very few IT organizations have the ability to have that advantage. So it's really more about excellence and execution. And I agree about, you know, how do you create value? And I know we've always said that. One of the things I love about the age we're in now is that you can actually spend more time on creating value because you're not as hampered by, you know, big monolithic systems anymore.
Who's listening?
So I think that it's spot on. All right, so that's the second question then is so that was great. So you've got this idea about changing. You know, where are you on the journey today, and you know, what positive results have you seen? How has the business embraced this change? Yeah,
and you know, for us, it's certainly a journey. We're not perfect. We're not done. We likely will never be done. Maybe that's a form of job security. I don't know. But the good news is, you know, we've seen a lot of positive change in things like the way we're perceived, even within the organization. And that starts with us internally in terms of how we behave. So we went through this entire process around what are kind of the key behaviors, and there's a whole sort of set of documentation and almost like collateral around the sort of key behaviors we wanted to embed within the organization, such that we could show up differently, because the change obviously starts with us as an organization. Part of that was this idea of consultative partnership, and crossing the line into the business, really walking a mile in their shoes, being not only the experts on the technology, but the experts on the business as well. And I always come back to, like, traditional IT, we always kind of go out and hire these big 5 consultants to come in and do a bunch of work for us, right? And typically that's because we're looking to drive a decision, and maybe they're playing tiebreaker with our business partners so that they can kind of consult with us and tell us what to do for all intents and purposes. But there's no reason why we can't have those skills in-house within the context of the work that we do within business technology. And really what that means to me is having a point of view, right? So how do we actually show up with a point of view around the business? How do we actually show up with also an external point of view? And again, it's one of the reasons we hire in external consultants, is that they have kind of a landscape view of what's going on with the technology out in the industry. And we encourage our folks within business technology to spend a good degree of their time not only looking at their work on a day-to-day basis, and that's important, but looking up and looking out as to what's going on in the industry. So if they're working on Salesforce, or they're working on kind of sales-related technologies, what are the latest and greatest technologies that are out there in the industry, and that they can actually bring to the table, so that they show up as the expert around the landscape around sales technology. Similarly with HR technology, what are the latest and greatest kind of HR people-related technologies? So kind of embedding those behaviors has really allowed us to show up differently, and things like, we've been measuring NPS score, for example, over the last 3 years now, almost, that I've been here. And I think we started at about 45% NPS for what was IT, which wasn't great. It was a starting position. Where now we just measured this at 83%, so I'm very happy about that. It's moving onwards and upwards, which leads me to believe we're kind of moving in the right direction, but clearly we're not done. And so just to kind of key in on the sort of key themes, I think one is business impact and consultative partnership. We kind of talked about that. The second is, I would say, and kind of the key to this that we're really hammering and focusing in on right now is around user experience. And ultimately, business technology owns the user experience of the products that we produce. No one else owns it for us, right? And we may get asked to do things from a business perspective that may not make sense from a user experience standpoint. And so really looking for our folks to push back on the business and making sure that they're doing the right things when it comes to the overall user experience we're trying to push out there. And again, we've seen a lot of improvement around how we've done that. And primarily, this, Brian, we do a lot around Slack on Slack and our own implementation of Slack, drinking our own champagne, as they say. But we actually use the platform a lot to automate many of the processes that we have in place through bots and apps and things like that. And again, the real focus is on how do we create this kind of much more productive experience for our users and keep them in the place that largely they do their work in terms of collaborating, but also managing their workflow. And there's lots of examples of that, whether it's like IT support, where we have about 40% of our support that's fully automated via an intelligent chatbot, or whether it's approvals, that we route all of our approvals into Slack from any different business system and people can approve them. So again, it's all under the guise of that user experience and providing this much more sort of pleasant and productive user experience. So the good news is we're making an impact. There's lots more to do, and certainly it's a journey, as they say.
Yeah, that was excellent. I think you kind of hit on question 3 that I had a little bit, but maybe we can touch a little bit on what that journey looks like. And now that you've made this big transition, I'm sure that you and Nicole and your leadership team and the whole staff is thinking about, okay, where do we take it next? Because it is a journey. It's a never-ending journey. What do you think? Yeah,
there's lots going on, and there's lots we can do. And I actually love, I quote this often on my team's probably sick of hearing it, but I love the rule of 3 and 10 from a guy called Hiroshi Mikitani, who's the CEO of Rakuten, so the big Japanese e-commerce site. And roughly stated, the rule of 3 and 10 states that everything breaks at roughly multiples of 3 and 10, right? So processes and systems that work well for a company of, say, 30 people really starts to break down when you get to 60 or 90, and then at 300 people and beyond, right? And so the message is you continuously have to look at how to reinvent and kind of innovate around your processes and systems. It's kind of an ongoing effort. It's almost never ending, right? And that's really the way I look at our job within business technology, is this focus on continuous improvement. And just when you think you've got to the finish line, you're kind of going back around and kind of reinventing those processes just in time, especially in a growth company environment like GitLab or Slack, becomes incredibly important as you move forward. So the good news is we have positive feedback. You know, we're doing well. We've got a lot of sort of good input from our users and good engagement, but there's a lot more that we need to do in terms of sort of continuous improvement. And I think about some specific things. I mean, there's lots of kind of project type work going on. There's lots of sort of demand from the business, but I think about things like we've just started an enterprise architecture practice, right? And we were kind of dabbling in enterprise architecture in the past. We're getting much more serious about that now as we move forward. We're looking at things like business capabilities, and really what I mean by that is, how do we actually give our business partners a scorecard for their technology landscape around how are we doing in terms of our business capabilities and our ability to automate those capabilities, which helps us really plan much more effectively as we move forward and start to get to more sort of long range planning. And then the last thing we're really focused on, which will be something that hits us as we step into the new fiscal year, is really getting success scorecards. I think about, you know, what we do around customer success within Slack is making sure that our customers are successful at their implementation of Slack, right? And they're taking full advantage of the platform. I want to take the same concept and apply it to how we roll out business technology systems. So we have almost like scorecards around how well are our solutions being adopted, our products being adopted in our user community relative to where they could be. And then really partnering hard with our business partners to kind of push them on, driving for greater adoption. And that could mean, you know, changes in technology, changes in capability, or it could mean more enablement from a business perspective as well. So those are just kind of some of the things we're thinking about as we move forward here.
I love it. That's great. I think that we hope to mature our organization to do some of those very things. We've talked about things like enterprise architecture. I think that one of the challenges is doing things at the right time and in the right order. Yeah. It's easy to try to get ahead of yourself, and you have to have that sort of planned out. I think enterprise architecture is a perfect example. I know it's something that needs to be done. It's just really difficult when you're still drinking from the fire hose and you've got other sort of things that need to be fixed first. But it's something
exactly right.
You got to strive for.
And that's exactly what we found. I mean, you know, coming in kind of on day one, recognizing that, I even remember talking about enterprise architecture and the interview process and how important it was. I didn't actually think it would take me kind of 2.5 years to get to a point where we'd start an enterprise architecture practice. But there's just so many other things going on, especially in a high growth environment. Like, for example, we went public during that 2.5 year process, and I spent pretty much the first year preparing for that, you know, thinking about SOX and how do we operate as a public company and all of that. So there's definitely distractions that take you away from enterprise architecture, but you get to a point where, you know, that's going to become crucial because you have to have an architecture that scales. So hence the reason we're really starting to key in on that now.
Great. So this is the part where we're going to open up for team members to ask questions, and this is really a GitLab sort of way we do meetings. You know, I already prepped you. There's no slides. The video is, you know, that's like a little taboo, even a little bit, to share your desktop.
Oh, really? Oh my goodness, you've broken some laws.
But, yeah, it's just more about, you know, staying on point. So we've got the document here, and the way it works is, you know, of course, with the GDoc capabilities, there's a lot of multiple edits. So what we're going to do now is we're going to get into the Q&A for everybody. They're going to verbalize questions, and I just encourage you to go ahead and interact as much as possible. It'll be a free-flowing sort of world. in the document right now.
That's
Christopher
good.
Nelson has the first question. Christopher, would you like to verbalize your question?
Yeah, I would. Thanks so much today, Stephen. I'm an enterprise apps guy myself and also a big fan of Haggis. Question that I have for
Excellent.
you is, you know, in your rebranding, so I'll just ask the first two in a row, like tell us something that you did well that you would recommend do again, and then also tell us something that you did not do well that you would say don't ever do this.
Yeah, and actually, it's not often you find someone who likes haggis, so that's fantastic. That's
I
fantastic.
spent some time in the Highlands myself.
Oh, you have? Whereabouts?
I actually spent 6 months in Glasgow, and I
Oh,
lived
wow.
in the Gorbals.
Oh my gosh, that's a tough area to live in.
Well, I'll tell you what, when you are the only American around for miles, you actually are quite popular. So it's
I can imagine. It's a friendly city. There's no question about that. So they love Americans over there.
they do, even in the Gorbals.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Fantastic. I spent some good time in Glasgow myself. I'm from Edinburgh originally, but I have spent some time in Glasgow. But yeah, so something that we did well. So I think, thank goodness, we recognized that, you know, first of all, we needed someone who could help us sort of manage through this change, and something I'm very happy with. I hired Nicole, and she has a background in this kind of sort of change enablement, not only from a system standpoint, but also from a sort of organizational standpoint. So I would say that the overall communication, I mean, things like, you know, the video, and we're breaking some laws here at GitLab by showing the video, but things like that are really effective to get the word out, right? And the thing we were nervous about was, hey, you know, what happens if we step into this thing and we've changed our name from IT to business technology, and people would just feel like it's kind of lipstick on a pig. It's just the same old thing, right? So we really wanted it to feel different. So I think the initial splash that we made, and then the sort of consistent communication around that things were changing. Here's how things are going to be different. Here's how we're going to show up different, etc. That worked really well. So I think the communication becomes really important, and making sure, so communication and education, making sure that, you know, the people within your organization understand why the change is being made, and they can actually help sort of reiterate that and be the champion for that change as well. So that would be something I would kind of double down on, is that communication and education. I would say the things that didn't necessarily go as well as we might have anticipated is we actually had a good degree of resistance from our team members, even our leadership team initially. Some members of our leadership team were a bit skeptical of the change. There was a couple of folks on there, and even that percolated down into the organization. So it took us a couple of rounds to really, you know, talk through why this was going to be different, and you know, even up to towards the end where we're going to unveil the change, there was still a degree of skepticism. And again, it was mostly around, you know, if we're gonna do this, then it needs to be a significant difference. It can't just be a name change, because then people will just get jaded with the whole thing, right? So I think, you know, recognizing that not everyone's going to, you know, line up and get on board with the change, and you're going to have to spend a good degree of time bringing people along with you, and I think we could have done a better job of that ultimately.
So Daniel Parker, you got the next question. Would you like to verbalize?
Daniel, are you a haggis lover as well?
No, no, I would never try that.
Don't knock it till you've tried it. It's great.
Yeah, not
Daniel,
a fan of
also just,
scabs.
Daniel, it might be good as well for everybody to, because Stephen is a guest speaker, just maybe say where you're located as well, so we can get a sense of you know, the world that GitLab is.
Yeah, so I'm located in Quito, Ecuador, but I'm from Australia
wow.
originally. So yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Whereabouts in Australia?
Melbourne.
Oh, yeah.
Close to Melbourne.
That's
Not
awesome.
exactly
We have an office in Melbourne. It's a great place.
It is a great place. I agree. Yeah, thanks for being here and answering our questions. It's been really good. my question is, how do you bring business partners together to focus on common business goals when their goals, especially for product teams, is very much more product focused? And just for some context on this, I'm an integrations engineer, and we're working on trying to streamline and improve the health of our integrations. And one of those is the way that leads and sales come in from the product side and the customer portal into our finance systems. And so we're working with those engineering teams who tend to be very much just, focused primarily on their product and less on the business goals that we have. No,
it's a great question. And by the way, we have that same exact challenge. Now the good news is, I would say, over the course of time, we've gotten a lot better at it, but it's certainly still not perfect. So, and you tend to find, as we do, and I have got this a meeting this morning on this very topic, trying to sort of highlight the importance of business priorities to product folks is challenging to do, because they tend to be sort of myopically focused on building the product, and that, that's what they're incented to do. I would say in the last year or so, maybe 18 months, we've gotten a lot better at the balance, and to me, it's been around, it's one thing to have, and again, it's typical of sort of startup and early phase companies, is you have to have an amazing product, right? Otherwise you don't have a business, and that's core to your company. But ultimately, you also have to, as you scale as a company, have a great business, right? And the ability to, sell, the ability to service, the ability to support becomes exceptionally important. And just having a great product is not going to allow your company to flourish and scale, right? So we've gotten much better around our exec team really recognizing that these business priorities, for example, things like quote to cash, or changing integrations around your lead processes and how they flow through, having a best-in-class MarTech stack and all of that, which, by the way, are all connected to the product, certainly at Slack as well. They need to be a priority. And so now at least we have a work stream in the planning process where we've been able to go back to the product organization and ensure that is equally weighted around all the other things they're trying to plan for. It took a while to get there, and my advice would be really trying to get the support of the executives that for example, in the sales process, we were trying to do the same thing around quote to cash. Getting our head of sales, our chief revenue officer, into the conversation alongside me, for example, with our chief product officer, to ensure that we really understood the importance of the work that we were trying to do here. And if we didn't actually enable the business effectively, we would all fail. So really starting to have the conversation at that level so that we could get the support, and then kind of systemically changing the planning process over the course of time is what worked for us. But I think in large part it needs to come from that level of conversation to sort of change the dialogue, such that people recognize we're trying to build a great business here as well as build a great product. Does that help?
Yeah, thanks. That's really good.
Yeah, awesome.
It's a very germane topic right now, and you're spot on. Rob Parker, you're next. Would you like to verbalize your question? Don't forget to let Stephen know where you're located.
Sure. Hey, Stephen, thanks for joining. Very insightful content. I'm Rob Parker. I'm Daniel Parker's younger brother.
All right.
And I'm located in a little town north of Atlanta, Georgia.
Awesome. Nice
to meet you. So as we think about rebranding, repositioning, working differently with a business, looking for a little bit more concrete detail on where you're spending your time, where your teams are spending their time. Are they 50% within the business technology function itself, 100% focused on new technology, 80% focused working with business stakeholders? Can you give us a rough breakdown of where your time is spent now, maybe as opposed to where it might have been spent before?
Yeah, so we can start with where I spend my time, and then we can maybe delve into the team. And I think the team would vary based on where they are, and maybe we can talk a little bit about how we're organized briefly as well. But for me, I would say, people ask me this question a lot, funnily enough, and I always wonder when I get asked in my team if they're wondering, what the heck does this guy do with his time, right? And in reality, that when I step back to think about it, it's probably split in thirds, right? I spend a third of my time with business stakeholders, and oftentimes it's on various different escalations, and things like the previous conversation we had around how do we actually change the planning process from a product standpoint and stuff like that. So those are very sort of key stakeholder conversations. I spend the other third on team-related things, whether it's with my directs or skip level or those sorts of talent, people-related things. And then I also spend a third of my time now externally facing. So I mentioned before, we do a lot around Slack on Slack. So we actually just got off a sort of webinar series we've been doing called The Modern CIO, which has really been around, how do we sort of showcase how we run the business of IT using Slack, that type of thing. So that's kind of where I spend my time. And by the way, the sort of last category there is a lot of fun, right? Because you actually get to go out and meet other IT folks and, share best practices. I learn as much from them. Brian was talking about him leaning on me. I lean on Brian as well. And that's the great thing about being in this role, is that there's a really kind of vibrant network of people that have been around different companies, and it's great to sort of reconnect with them. And if one of us has a problem, inevitably someone else has already solved that problem. So it's been able to tap into that is just fantastic. So anyway, that's a little bit about my time. And then depending on where people are in the organization, it will vary around where they spend their time. So we have certain roles that are much more business facing, and we've aligned business technology to the business, no big surprise. So we have a go-to-market team that's responsible for sales, marketing, and legal. We kind of bundled legal into that. And they spend, I would say, gosh, probably 50% of their time, again, depending on who they are, with the business. And we've also got, a corporate systems team that do finance and HR, and they would spend a similar sort of allocation of time. We've got other teams aligned up with other business units. We also have a core engineering team. And they're typically responsible for things like integrations. They do a lot of build work. They build a lot of bots and apps and automation type work. So those, almost like partner-facing teams will tap into the engineering team for things like integrations and build-out work. However, the business-facing teams will also have expertise around things like, Apex code for Salesforce, configuration code or configuration capabilities for Workday and things of that nature. But for really cutting code, doing complex integration work, writing bots and apps, they would tap into the engineering team. And then we also have a data and analytics team as well. So the engineering team is much less focused on spending time with the business, much more focused on technology. The data and analytics team spends a lot of time with the business. We have data scientists. We also have data engineers. Data scientists probably spend more time in the business. Data engineers probably less. So it really depends on where people are in the organization as to how much time they spend with their business partners. I would say it's difficult to answer how it was before, because it was kind of I don't want to say a small but mighty rabble that was just trying to do a lot of everything. I remember our networking guy, when I first joined, he was not only supporting the Wi-Fi network, he was also configuring Salesforce. So he was wearing a lot of hats, and clearly that wasn't going to be a sustainable model for us moving forward. So it's kind of tough to compare that with now. We're a 100-person organization, right? We started with like 7 people. Within 2.5 years, we've got to about 100 people. So, it's changed drastically over the course of time.
That's wonderful perspective. Thank you.
Sure, thanks.
Carl, you have the next.
Yeah, I moved just to let everyone know, I've moved a few questions around trying to get the flow down. I want to let some of other team members ask some questions. So Parl, you're up.
Thanks. So my question, you kind of mentioned this earlier. My name is Parl, by the way, and since we're saying locations, I'm originally from Detroit, but I'm hanging out in Utah for a while.
Okay.
My question is, you had mentioned that you've embedded your team within the business. How large are those teams typically, and what struggles did you have initially getting that model to work, and how did you advocate for growing that team?
Yeah, and I'm a big believer in success kind of breeds success, so to speak. So we did start with one of the things on the way in. So I report into the CFO, here at Slack, and you know, there's challenges with that, but it's also I see it as an advantage because, you know, ultimately he controls the purse strings of the company, so it's kind of a good place to be, I would say. And so part of me actually coming in was, you know, just kind of stipulating on the way in that we needed some investment within IT if we were going to be serious about scaling the company. And thankfully, you know, Slack has been serious about scaling the company, and there has been that investment in IT. But there was kind of initial seed investment, if you like. But then you have to kind of show the value of that and show the success of the model. And then a lot more investment has come from there. I mean, once people see that, oh, wow, we can automate, you know, a lot of the work that we're doing. We can, you know, kind of unlock new business models from, you know, using technology. There's all these kind of things that we can do. When you get some points on the board, some successes, then, you know, more investment will come from there. And you know, I always say that the mark of success of doing good work is yet more work, right? So be careful what you wish for. There's no shortage of work, it seems. But you know, some of the challenges about embedding, you know, the sort of IT within the business, or kind of aligning them to the business. I'd say that there wasn't so much challenge about that, because, you know, our business partners are only too eager to get their hands on IT folks, our business technology folks, to get stuff done. I mean, if it was up to them, they'd like to control their IT person and like just give them stuff to do, and you know, have someone that would just do their stuff. I think that the bigger challenge was really kind of stepping back and again getting to that more sort of consultative partnership model, which was less about you just give me the order and I'll kind of deliver the, you know, the what you want. And I always talk about, again, I use these overused analogies, so if you've heard it before, then I apologize, but I use it all the time with my team. It's like the McDonald's model of IT, right? You go into McDonald's, you order a burger, and they kind of give you what you ordered. So do we want to show up as kind of a fast food vendor, or do we want to show up as a dietitian, right? Where we're actually giving them something that's going to be good for them, and will actually make them healthy, make their business healthy ultimately into the future. And clearly that's the model we want to be in. So it's more migrating to that model was a challenge, because again, the traditional model that we're used to is you do what I tell you to do and you just get it done. And don't ask too many questions about it, just do it, right? Whereas we want to be much more in the model of, hang on a second, is this the right thing to do for the business? For example, we won't take on any body of work unless it's aligned to a key strategy or OKR objective of the business. And if we can show that alignment and we can show the value associated with that, sure, we'll take it on, right? But those are the types of conversations that really in the past weren't happening, and they're happening much more now. Again, it's not perfect, but they're happening much more now.
Thank you.
Good stuff.
Thank
I
you.
love it. Taylor Murphy, you're up.
Hey, Stephen. Thanks for doing this. I'm in Nashville, Tennessee.
Oh, nice.
And got a simple question here. What 3 books do you recommend the most to people? Can be related to your career or not?
Oh gosh, that's a tough question. So Nashville, I'd love to go to Nashville. How is it in Nashville nowadays?
It's all right. People are pretty stupid downtown, but we've got a mask mandate around all the coronavirus stuff, so maybe that's helping a bit. But it's a great town. I like it.
Is the live music scene still going on?
A little bit, but certainly not as much pre-COVID. So, but yeah, there's some stuff going on downtown, I think. I have 2 kids and I don't go down there ever. So
Yeah, fair enough. Gosh, you know, it's a good question. I have 3 books on my desk right now, which are interesting. So somebody sent me this book around Colin Powell, if you can see that. I haven't actually read it yet, and there's another one about Ben Horowitz. If any of you have read that, it's kind of an interesting read. But the ones that have been impactful to me, I have to say I'm not a big self-help career book reader. I do read a lot. They tend to be kind of novels and fiction. I'm reading a great book right now. It's called The Girl with 7 Names, Escape from North Korea, which I'd highly recommend. It's fascinating. But honestly, I I'm not a huge self-help career book guy, so it's not a very compelling answer, I have to say. But that's it.
No worries. I like to see what people read. So thanks for sharing.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Peter Caldas, you're up next.
Oh, awesome. Thank you, Stephen, for doing this.
Sure.
So I'm located in the San Francisco Bay Area. And while I'm not a huge fan of haggis, I am partial to Scotch.
Oh, fantastic.
So my question is, how do you manage the constant influx of incoming requests from various groups within the company for, new technology or some vendor that they might necessarily have a fondness for, especially when your team might have other initiatives that you're trying to put forth?
Yeah, and it's a great question. And by the way, I love Scotch as well. My first job out of college, funnily enough, was I worked for a small startup company in Glasgow. Interesting, we were talking about the Gorbals earlier on. And my first job was to go up to the Scottish Highlands, up to the Whiskey Trail, and actually install a software package for Macallan, which is a really famous Scotch whiskey. And I spent, a couple of weeks up there, not only installing their software to sort of manage their inventory, but also training the people up there. It's like walking back in time onto this amazing estate in Scotland. It was fantastic. Still one of the best professional experiences I've had. And they actually gave me a 25-year-old bottle of Macallan away at the end of the 2-week period. So it was fantastic. It's a great memory. Nice. But yeah, so there is no question there's been like this explosion, especially nowadays in companies like ours, explosion of software. I mean, we always quote this when we talk to customers. The average large enterprise has over 1,000 pieces of software, SaaS providers that they use to run their company. And at Slack, we have about 250 pieces of software that are kind of in our landscape. And of course, people are out there and just swiping their credit card and doing their thing and trying out new software, right? So it becomes incredibly difficult to manage. We've actually kind of hit that head on, I will say, and there's a couple of things that we've done. First of all, in coming in, I got agreement that I, being the CIO of Slack, manage the software for the company, period. Now, I actually don't fund all the software. For example, the sales budget for Salesforce and related technologies and software sits within the sales organization, and it's a cost of sales. So we have kind of this distributed budget mechanism, but I manage the software, which means the choice of the software, how we procure the software, the negotiations associated with the software, and all that stuff. The installation of it, etc. So first of all, that was great, just to get that sort of notional agreement across the executive team that's the way it was going to work. The second thing we did was that we actually have a software planning process where if someone has an idea, whether it's like an idea around, we need a new, project planning tool, or whatever it happens to be, or they have a specific request for a piece of software, then they'll actually put it into a channel inside of Slack. And we have, the business technology folks in there, we have the procurement folks, the finance folks, the security folks, all have eyes on that request coming through, right? So we can actually get sort of engaged in the process relatively early on. And then we'll review that and say, well, we have a tool in our toolkit. For example, right now we're trying to consolidate content providers, like content repositories. And we have, and a lot of companies have this challenge, we have every content repository known to mankind at Slack. I mean, you name it, we have it. And we don't need them. Like, we need one or maybe two at the most. So we're trying to consolidate that, but we still get additional requests for other content providers. So when they come through, the answer to that would be, hey, we have a tool in our toolkit that you can use, and we're happy to extend that to you so that you can use that. And inevitably, then you get into the conversation around well, there's this specific capability it doesn't provide, and we really want to buy the software for that reason. But at least we're in a dialogue at that point in time, and we can kind of work with them around doing the right thing. And in some cases, there's a good case for it, and there's value associated with it, and it makes sense for us to bring it through the process. But we have a 2-week SLA to kind of get through that process, at least to give them an answer, which includes initial security review and things of that nature. Now, that said, the second piece of this is, so at least we have a process for, learning about it and getting the dialogue going. The second piece of it is how do you trade that off relative to all the other priorities that you have going on? So you've planned for, your roadmap, say, for the next couple of quarters, and then all of a sudden something comes in from left field. We have a pretty, I would say, stringent nowadays planning process inside of Slack that starts from OKRs of the business and then sort of translates down into individual initiatives. So people really understand what the roadmap is. It's published. And if things come in from left field, then it'll be a conversation around trade-off. Either it's like, if it's really critical, maybe it's an additional funding conversation. If it's not, then we have to trade off relative to all the other priorities that we have for the functions. And it's kind of a well-trodden path and understood conversation around how we go about that. So now it wasn't that way to begin with, 2.5 years ago, but now we have at least gotten to a point where we have pretty mature processes around how we would tackle that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.
Stephen, that was fantastic. We are at time, so we're gonna have the other questions answered some other way in the future here. But I really appreciate you taking the time to meet with us today. It's good to just get insight and just sort of a viewpoint from someone else, and it will not surprise you that what you've said is probably already well understood as the same issues that we are experiencing here. And it's kind of the same for every organization, especially for the technology spaces that we live in a hyper-growth world. So I really want to thank you so much for joining us today, giving us some insights, letting us start our journey into rebranding what we're going to be doing, how we're going to be showing up. I think that's the big key there that you talked about, is it's not just the name, it's also, how you act differently. So thank you very much, and we'll look forward to the next time.
Yeah, no, and thank you guys. It's great to meet you all, and good luck in your journey. And my parting shot is try haggis. You'll be surprised at how much you like it.
Thank you so much,
Right.
Brian.
You got it, Nicole. All right, everyone. Have a
Cheers.
great rest of the day. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.